Sav, welcome to the show. Good to have you here. How's it going?
It's going great. It's so good to see you again. I haven't seen you since we shot your Talking Head interview back in 2019. So it's good to see you, man.
Oh my gosh, the before times. Oh
Very
wow,
much the before times.
the simpler times. Yes. Yeah, you took on this topic, Chasing Amy, which is oddly enough a controversial film. I just thought it was another raunchy, Kevin Smith movie. But tell me how this project came about, how it impacted you. I know, and this is a very personal documentary for you.
Yeah. I mean, the journey really started at age 12 when I was growing up in suburban Kansas. And, I loved TV, I loved movies. And I was a pretty lonely kid, dealing with a lot of harassment at school for seeming queer. I hadn't even figured out I was queer yet. And so, these were things that made my life very difficult, among other things. I had other problems as a child, but I mean, this was the big thing. And so I stumbled across Chasing Amy one day while looking for a movie to watch in my mom's like physical media collection. And I saw Chasing Amy on it. I was going through a thing where I only wanted to watch Ben Affleck movies. I saw that it was rated R. I asked for permission to watch it, and my mom gave me permission. And I watched this movie, and it became a life raft for me in so many ways. I was attracted to it because it had this really romantic sensibility that I've had, since I could form a thought, basically. I thought it was very sincere and tender and emotional, and I really responded to that honesty. But a big part of it was the characters of Alyssa and Hooper in the film that were openly queer characters that I thought were these like incredible characters, and I had never seen queer people before that just seemed like people I would want to be friends with, let alone like, fully embodied people that were not the butt of a joke perpetually.
Right.
And from there, the obsession kind of grew, and filmmaking became something that I wanted to do and eventually became a vocation. And as I got older, I found that there was like these divisive feelings around Chasing Amy, where everybody had a very strong reaction, no matter what it was. I never met anybody who was like neutral on Chasing Amy.
Right.
And I thought that was a really interesting point of like an inflection point to start this discovery process of like, okay, what is it about this movie specifically as it intersects with the queer community? And from there, it became a much more personal story where I came of age against the backdrop of Chasing Amy for the second time.
Yeah, that film I didn't know was considered controversial. I love the speech about Lando in it, and the
Right.
talk of Star Wars, but yeah, I mean, it is good to see just queer characters being just people, like just people, and not a focus necessarily just amongst the group, just, and that, I guess that was different. I didn't consider it like that radical in terms of that aspect. And it's among my favorite Kevin Smith films. But what led, it might be good. We should just watch the trailer, because I want people watching the interview to get a taste of this movie. And
Sure
then
thing.
we'll talk about it on the back end. It's, your trailer.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to watch at this point, but let's
Oh
see.
wow. Well, I'm sorry for that, but
No, you're fine.
here we go. Here we go. Anything you have to say about it, just let me know. But here.
Do you understand why I love this movie so much?
No.
For Sav Rodgers, a queer kid growing up in Kansas, role models came from an unexpected source.
When I was 12, I had a movie where the gay and lesbian characters were good and funny and out. They were able to live as their authentic selves.
Chasing Amy.
Chasing Amy.
Chasing Amy.
The third film from director Kevin Smith.
It's about a guy who falls in love with a lesbian.
But Sav's about to find out. Life's not about finding your heroes.
Welcome to the house that Amy built.
It's about finding yourself.
I'm directing a project about the legacy of Chasing Amy as an LGBTQ film. Do you find the film to be authentic to the LGBTQ community?
I find it authentic to the straight dude who falls for a queer woman community. No longer being a lesbian by meeting the right man.
That's going to be controversial.
Ben Affleck's goatee was a bad idea.
Let's go into the movie.
Something that's problematic can still mean a lot in your development.
It was brave to portray somebody fluid.
Seeing that movie helped me figure out, oh, that's me.
It's gay.
This girl loves me.
It's cool to come to a place where a bunch of stuff changed your life. All right, let's go. This is where they have their big fight.
Well, we're purifying it for our butts.
You were so supportive, and I was so alone in the world.
How wonderful that you found something.
The movie is amazing, but whatever moved you is a dark side too.
I can't erase the past.
You don't just get a pass for that.
I didn't know what I expected. I did not expect all this.
Maybe what's really troubling you is that your fragile fantasy might not be true.
Can we tap? This movie made me be honest with myself. Chasing Amy and chasing Amy. My butt has been where Ben Affleck's butt has been. Basically Ben Affleck. A little shorter.
My goodness. What a picture. Everyone should go see it when it hits theaters this weekend.
What's it like now to watch this trailer? It was such a journey, and again, as I'll repeat, I didn't know it was controversial. I know people in the queer community did not like that it leaned into maybe what could be interpreted as stereotypes. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the controversy with Chasing Amy or its complex legacy, you know, it wasn't that everybody hated it and everybody was talking about it. This is a well-regarded, well-reviewed, well-liked movie released in 1997 that slowly started to, you know, and even from the outset of its release, began to accumulate critique over time of, wow, this is some sort of queer erasure, which I think is a perfectly valid point of view. But I don't think it purports to be anything other than a personal story from Kevin talking about love and loss in relationships. And so the discovery that I set out to do, like, I knew that I would never be personally objective about Chasing Amy because it would never change my relationship to what that 12-year-old kid in Kansas thought of the movie, you know, as it was getting him out of a really dark period of his life. And people have diverse experiences as it pertains to cinema. It's entirely subjective. Two writers at Film Threat could watch the same movie and have diametrically opposed opinions. And that's some of the beauty about cinema, is that we can talk about it and we can share this common language known as cinema. We can have these empathetic experiences and we can have these different responses. And so the film set out to, you know, kind of unpack the complex legacy of it from the queer community, but then became this like highly personal story where I have a life again, thanks to how much I've loved this movie, and also the way that a relationship with a movie can change over time and how that's natural and fine. A lot of us don't, you know, some of us love Star Wars as a kid and some of us don't love it as much now. And some of us are still feverish about it. And that's great. You know, but life, you know, things change. And so this is a movie about coming of age and how life changes and what cinema does for us. And I think it's this like empathetic experience that I think anybody can relate to. You know, ideally, if you're watching this interview right now, you love movies. And if you love movies, I think that's a great entry point to having this empathetic experience that allows you to walk in somebody else's shoes for 92 minutes. They just happen to be my Doc Martens.
Yeah, I like how you put two writers from Film Threat can give completely different reviews. That has happened, by the way. And I don't care if I disagree with someone. What I love is the conversation. And like you, I have had films that had a tremendous impact in my life. I didn't necessarily make a documentary about it, but I mean, I guess the white whale for the film is getting, I don't mean that as a joke, is getting Kevin Smith to be in the movie, right? Like you need footage from the film to talk about the film. How'd you get Kevin involved and on board?
You know, Kevin reached out to me, which was the most incredible part of it, was that I gave a TED Talk, an 8-minute TED Talk called The Rom-Com That Saved My Life, where I detail the hardships that Chasing Amy got me through, and what happens when you know you exist. What happens when there is a thing that keeps you afloat. What happens when you respond to a piece of art that makes you feel like you exist. And I'm not being hyperbolic about this. Like, genuinely, I didn't know anything about being queer, really. Like, my mom had a gay best friend, but I didn't really see myself in him, right? It was the complex nuances of Chasing Amy that really allowed for me to feel like I existed for the first time, let alone know anything about trans people. The only thing that I knew that trans women existed. I wasn't really sure of the existence of trans men at that point. But if somebody had said the word transgender to me at 12, things might have clicked. If somebody explained to me at age 12 what that was, things might have clicked a lot sooner for me. And so because I had Chasing Amy and I gave this TED Talk about what the movie did for me, and the impact of it on my life, Kevin reached out within an hour of it being online because so many people had sent it to him.
Wow.
And he offered to be in the movie and connect me with people just right on Twitter, back before it was a total hellscape. And it changed everything for Kevin to participate and to say yes and to be as kind and as generous with his time as he was throughout the process of making the film.
Yeah, and did you have help with the doc in terms of, because it's not just Kevin, you got a lot of people in the film, like Joey Lauren Adams, among others. So what was that whole process like? I've made docs myself. It takes years, usually twice as long as you think it will.
Yeah, I mean, and for Chasing Amy, so many, Kevin was the one who introduced me to Jason Lee and Scott Mosier, to kind of open my world up and the people who I could talk to up. Shaz Bennett, who's an incredible filmmaker who did Alaska is a Drag, and she was the showrunner of the last season of Queen Sugar. She's the one who introduced me to Guinevere Turner. But also I had a film school professor, Laura Kirk, who was the outreach initially for Guinevere. Melanie Addington at the Tallgrass Film Festival was the one to introduce me to Joey. And so all that to say, filmmaking is a team sport. Life is a team sport. And I was so thankful that people were willing to stake their credibility and their reputation to vouch for me and say, hey, you should do an interview with this guy. And all of that helped. And we were able to get these wonderful interviews, these brilliant interviews where, people tell their real stories and share them with not just me, but now with all of you who get to watch the film. And so, yeah, it's a team sport and it takes a while. And I remember when I was sitting at, at TED doing the residency, preparing for the TED Talk, but also doing research for the documentary, I would cold call people being like, hey, I'm doing this documentary. And, the question would be like, oh, what studio are you with? And I was like, studio? What are you crazy? We don't have that kind of money. And then people wouldn't be interested sometimes in talking to me if we didn't have a distributor in place already. And so a lot of it just took resilience and audacity, but also, I intimately knew the history of Chasing Amy. I knew the stories from what was on the record by, interviews that had been given. And so it took a lot of time and a lot of patience, but also a lot of kindness from people who were willing to vouch for me.
You mentioned Guinevere Turner. I've been on panels with her at festivals. I think Guinevere has a brilliant mind. A lot to say on that, so I'm glad that she's included. You really got some big names. What about clearance of footage? What were some of the challenges or obstacles actually?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Chasing Amy is based in archival, right? And so we got clearances where we could, and we also have lawyers who, took a look at it and made sure, to sign, a fair, stating and attesting to the idea that it all falls within a fair use defense, which is not something to take lightly, by the way, but we licensed footage where we could track down sources. We worked with an archival producer that helped us source things. And that is not inexpensive, right? Yeah. We have 2 licensed songs in the whole movie. One is called Jumpstart, which you may have heard in the trailer, but also in the original Chasing Amy during the rom-com montage scene. which is like wonderful. And so we were so happy to be able to license that song. And then we also licensed one song for the end credits, but that's a very laborious, expensive process that was not without its heartaches and challenges. I will say, God, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but we did we tried to license a song that I thought was going to be a perfect fit. And, you know, when you go through the process of licensing a song, you reach out to you have to reach out to the label and they have to ask the writer. And the only thing they had for the log line, or they had for the movie, was a log line. And it mentioned the fact that I was transgender. And our music supervisor came back to me and was like, I've never seen this happen before, but the writer just said no. And we checked out the online profile of this writer of the song that was one of my favorite songs before this. And it was just a lot of transphobic garbage on their feed. And I was like, wow, that's really disappointing. You know, this is so anyway, that's not to say that there's not challenges in the process. Everything worked out hunky-dory for me so far, where, you know, we get to show the movie, we get to be in movie theaters, and we have a distributor, you know, all of these things that are an unlikely story for a pop culture doc, right? But it's not without its heartaches, and it's not without its growing pains, and it's certainly not without challenges.
Yeah. Now it's one thing to make the film. It's not, your job is not done.
No.
Once the movie's, so talk to me about the process of festivals and then getting to where you are now in distribution.
Yeah. I mean, let me tell you, I really thought things would move a lot faster. So for context, I was so thankful that we premiered at the 2023 Tribeca Festival. They were just incredible partners for us immediately. And it was the right place to premiere, and I could not have been happier with that. You know, we kept selling out venues, and they kept upping our premiere venues and stuff and our capacity. I mean, they were really supportive and responsive to the film, and they were very early champions for us. And from there, we were and with our work with the Film Collaborative, who represented the film on the festival circuit, we were able to play at over 75 film festivals around the world, you know, and winning audience awards in countries we had never been to before, right? Where we didn't know anybody. And it was incredible to see the ways in which personal storytelling can be championed, hopeful stories can be championed, queer cinema in places where I wasn't sure if there was an audience for queer cinema. And it turns out queer cinema is for everywhere, right? You know, it's not just an American thing. You know, it's not just there's this false idea for some people that people in other countries won't watch queer things. And I'm like, that's just not true. That is entirely not true. And, you know, we have the data to suggest that on our side, but also you look at the maps of where films do well, you know, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, you look at that film and how well that did everywhere in the world, right? And so for us to be able to share the story with audiences who, you know, needed a story like this. We played in Poland, Nepal, Hong Kong, places that, you know, really just blew my mind. Amsterdam, you know, London, you know, and all across the continental United States. That means something for a filmmaker to be able to share their work with the world and for the world to respond so kindly. And so as we approach our theatrical run starting, you know, this weekend, November 1st, it's not lost on me how much work it's taken to get here. And also the documentary market is very different than when I started in 2018 with this film. It used to be that documentaries like ours were selling hand over fist for millions of dollars sometimes if you premiered at the right market festival. And, you know, it took us, over a year to sell the movie. And I'm so glad that we found the right partner to release this. Working with Level 33 has been amazing. You know, we're playing 83 theaters right now. As of this interview, 83 screens have booked our film, our queer doc, about chasing Amy and what it means to come of age and my life story. And it's because we have the right team that understands the rollout that we want to do. And so having the right partners in distribution, even if that means not working with the distributor, makes all of the difference.
Yeah, it's and then also marketing is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I you do have a website. I was able to easily track it down. It's chasingamydoc.com with all sorts of info, including there's merch, there's links to reviews, the trailer. You can contact you with this.
Yeah, contact us, book our film.
That's useful. But yeah, Mark, it's such a whole other animal. And when you're a small indie, you don't think you have to think beyond making the movie. Then it's, everything else you have to do and promote and this whole journey. Looking at it now, you couldn't see it then. Looking at it sort of with it in the rearview mirror, at least most of it, what is your takeaway from the whole experience? And what has it meant to you personally?
Oh man,
yeah, I know. I know. It's a big question.
It means everything to me to have been able to do this.
Yeah.
Because we were able to rally a community of incredible people working on this film across all, whether they were a PA for a day or they're a producer who's worked on this with me for 6 years. And the job is not over by any means. And in some ways, the job is never over as you become the arbiter of your film's legacy and you try to make sure that it can continue to connect with audiences. But we started this on September 1st, 2018, and there was some legwork that went into it beforehand. So to have gone through this process with the best people in the world, people who are kind and generous and wonderful, people who are smart and great storytellers, people who have lended us their credibility, whether for a day or for 6 years, that has meant everything to me, to feel supported as a filmmaker and to have the opportunity not to just tell any story, but to tell my personal story, right? And to feel supported in that, because I wasn't intending on being in it from the outset. I think you know this from when you did the interview in Chasing Amy, that I was not comfortable on camera and I didn't really want to be doing that. But to feel safe at a time where it feels like if you're vulnerable and you stick your neck out there, that you're being fed to the wolves in some ways, that the world is not kind enough or ready enough or whatever the case may be. And so to be supported and to be in community with incredible, brilliant people, that means everything. And the result is I made my dream movie. 6 years ago, I said, I want to make a movie about chasing Amy. And some people laughed and some people took it seriously. And for the people who were skeptical and for the people who believed in it from the beginning, they get to see it now. And I'm really proud of the results. We worked really hard on this. We put everything that we had into this, and to have it be met with such kindness and from both critics and audiences means everything, man. That 10 out of 10 film threat review, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like that like made me cry at Tribeca. I was having like these perpetual panic attacks before Tribeca, and just the
by the way, I did not write that.
I know.
I did not write the review.
I was so surprised. I was like, holy shit, 10 out of 10. Like, and such an effusive, kind thing. But like that review made me feel like the last 4.5 years at that point had been worth it. Where it was like, oh man, it connected with at least one person. But then to meet like parents of trans kids who drove from 2 hours away in Michigan to watch the film and to share it with their kid, like that means something, man. And I think it can only get better from here. And so I'm very humbled by that fact. And I'm also hoping that this gives me the opportunity to tell more stories, because that's all I've ever really wanted to do, is to make movies with my friends and ideally, to make them at a level where they can connect with audiences in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I know you maybe festivals and or distributors put your film in the queer bucket. I don't know if I even see it as that. It's more coming of age, I think, and self-discovery, which is relatable for everyone. My filmmaker that really changed my life when I was a kid, this is before Kevin Smith, was John Waters, who also happens to be queer. He has queer themes, but I don't see his movies as queer movies. I see them mostly as comedies and social commentary. So I'd say that your movie goes beyond that classification
Yeah.
And I hope that people check it out on that basis. So
well, thank you. You know, and I don't begrudge the label of queer. I am queer. I am trans.
It's fine.
And I want queer and trans people to see this movie. And ideally, I hope they like it. And if it's not for them, that's okay. But I hope that they give it an honest try. And I also hope that that's not that all it's reduced to. In the same way, I hope it's not just reduced to a coming of age story or a documentary. You know, I think, again, film is this like deeply empathic experience where you get to walk in somebody else's shoes for the 92 minutes that this movie goes on. And I think anybody can relate to wanting to be loved. Anybody can relate to wanting to feel like they have a place in the world. Yep. Anybody can relate to loving something, whether that's a movie or a person or their passion, their vocation. And I think that's the entry point, is that anybody can relate to these very human emotions. Everybody's felt like an underdog or discounted, or like they weren't sure if they completely fucked up or whatever. And I hope that wherever you're coming from, that you find something in it for you. Because as much as I don't think any film is for everybody, I do think that there is something that anybody could relate to within this film. And I hope they give it an honest shot.
Yeah, and there are universal themes. I'll say this. I just love that it's a film about a really kind of a relationship to a movie. I mean, I relate to that layer of it. You know what I mean? Like 100%. I have relationships with films and they evolve over time, and I think differently. And I just really think it's great that you're at the end of the journey, maybe not the end, a new beginning, and congratulations. And I hope people check it out. Chasing Amy Doc. It's in theaters now, first weekend of November, and congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you having me on here. I love Film Threat.
Thanks.
And I'm immensely grateful for the opportunity to talk about it with your audience.
Take care.
Thank you.
Movies.